Buenos días. Vamos a hablar de Lección Uno. We're going to talk about Lesson 1 today. And we will start with greetings. So, let's start with greetings. The word saludos is just a word for greetings. You would sometimes we even greet someone by saying saludos, or we send saludos to someone, send greetings. When we first approach someone, we might say, "How are you doing?" In Spanish, we can say that in an informal way with "¿Qué tal?" means "How are you doing?" Or we can say that with "¿Cómo estás?" which is the literal words "how" for "como" and "estás" you are doing. How are you doing? Now, right away, we want to talk about in Spanish how we distinguish between two different people when we're talking to people. We talk to people that we're familiar with. We may know them. They may be younger than us, so they may be little kids and we're older, or we already are familiar with them. If so, we address them as tú. ¿Cómo estás? Tú, with an accent. Okay? ¿Cómo estás tú? How are you doing? Now, if we come across someone that we are not familiar with, we haven't met them yet, or they're just not an acquaintance of ours, we actually ask it a little different way. We distinguish between people that we know and we're familiar with, and people whom we do not know, and we're going to be a little more formal or polite. And so instead of saying ¿Cómo estás tú?, we say ¿Cómo está usted? ¿Cómo está usted? And usted and tú both mean you. But tú means you when we're talking to somebody we're familiar with. Usted means you when we're talking to somebody we're not quite as familiar with. Okay? So, ¿cómo estás tú? Repeat after me. Try it on your own. ¿Cómo estás tú? ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo está usted? ¿Cómo está usted? Try repeating those. They both mean how are you doing? They also both we will answer with, because that verb estás means you are, we're going to change that verb and answer with estoy. Just as in English when we say how are you doing, we answer with I am. We change the verb from are to am. In Spanish it's the same concept. We change verbs when we answer. So, ¿cómo estás tú? Estoy. Yo estoy. Repite. Yo estoy. I am. Now, I can say I am any of these options. Estoy muy bien, bien, regular, así, mal, muy mal. I'm not very good. Okay, so we have all these options. We can use estoy primarily. We say estoy bien or estoy mal. With the others, we typically leave off the estoy, and we just say, just like in English, I might say, how are you? Instead of saying I am fine, you would just say fine. Same with Spanish. With all of these, we can leave off the estoy. If I say ¿Cómo estás tú?, you would just say muy bien or bien, regular. Okay? And then of course we want to be polite, and we would say thank you, gracias. Y tú, and you, if we are familiar with that person, or y usted, if we are unfamiliar with that person. Okay? So, let's just a quick repeat of that, and try to repeat after me as you go. ¿Qué tal? ¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo está usted? ¿Cómo está usted? Estoy bien. Estoy bien. Gracias. ¿Y tú? Muy bien. Gracias. ¿Y usted? So there we have greetings and ways to answer a greeting. All right, after we have said, how are you doing? We're going to possibly say, what's your name? The same thing happens. If we're talking to somebody and saying, what's your name, that we're familiar with, of course, that wouldn't happen too much. If we're already familiar with them, we may know their name. But it certainly could happen with kids younger than us. So we don't know their name, but because we're older than them, we're not going to treat them as usted. We're going to say, ¿Cómo te llamas? Repeat after me. ¿Cómo te llamas? ¿Cómo te llamas? Now, that is asking, in English, the best equivalent is, what is your name? ¿Cómo se llama usted? And that's how we would ask somebody that we haven't met yet. We don't know, because we're going to be polite with them. That's the unfamiliar way to say it. So, ¿Cómo se llama usted? ¿Cómo se llama usted? We will answer both of these questions the same way. But to answer them, it's important to understand, what are we actually asking here? The best English equivalent is, what's your name? But if we look at what's actually being asked in Spanish, we are saying como, which means how, and this word means to call. So we are literally saying here, how do you call yourself? Alright, and we'll talk about that later in the text, in the book. But this is what's called reflexive. The action of this verb is reflecting back to that person. How do you call yourself? But again, in English, you would never go up to somebody and say, how do you call yourself? No, the best equivalent in English is, what is your name? But understand that that's not exactly what's being asked in Spanish. So it's not being, llamas does not mean name, for example. It's a verb meaning to call. Okay? So, ¿Cómo te llamas? What's your name? ¿Cómo se llama usted? What's your name? Okay? Okay. So, what is your name? ¿Cómo te llamas? ¿Cómo se llama usted? Let's look at how we answer that. Because this asks, how do you call yourself? We're going to answer with me llamo. Me llamo. So notice, this means, how do you call yourself? That's a form of the verb. I change that to say I call myself, me llamo. I call myself. So when we say me llamo, we are literally saying in Spanish, I call myself. We are not saying my name is. Okay, that's crucial to understand, because a very common mistake that English speakers say when we're speaking Spanish is they think they're saying my name is, so we say me llamo es, and they put the word is in there because you think you're saying my name is blank, my name is Marcos. But we are not saying my name is, we are literally saying I call myself. So all we say is me llamo, and then we put our name in. Me llamo Marcos. Okay? Me llamo Marcos. So, repite. ¿Cómo te llamas? ¿Cómo te llamas? ¿Cómo se llama usted? ¿Cómo se llama usted? Me llamo. Me llamo. Now also notice, when we have two L's in Spanish, there is no L sound. No, it sounds very bad in Spanish to say a L sound with LL. Me llamo. We say a double L, almost like a Y, or sometimes with a little J or SH sound in there. Me llamo. Repite. Me llamo. Me llamo. Muy bien. Muy bien. Okay, now we're with presentations, presentaciones. We're going to talk about when you introduce someone to someone else. So we've asked about how are you doing, but now you may have a more than two people situation. You may be approaching a friend and you are with a friend, and you may be approaching somebody and you want to introduce the two people. So we're going to talk about that situation just a little bit. Once again, notice you need to decide if you're going to address the person that you're going to talk to and introduce these people, if you're going to address them as tú in the familiar form or usted in the polite form, and we have two different ways to do that here. If you're addressing them in the familiar form with tú, then it would be changes to te, and we say te presento. I am presenting, I present you. Okay? Or le still means you, I present you, but now it's that usted form. It's a pronoun for usted there. So, te presento a Maria, for example. So what we're saying is, hi, hola, presento, I present, te presento a Maria. I present you, or I introduce you to Maria. Te presento a Maria. Le presento a Maria. Okay, now once people have been introduced, they have a few different ways to say nice to meet you. Just like in English we might say nice to meet you, or it's a pleasure. Same thing in Spanish, we have a couple different ways to say it. You can say mucho gusto, which literally means much pleasure. Mucho gusto. Mucho gusto. Or you can say encantado or encantada. Now that one means I am pleased, or I'm enchanted, really, as you can see it kind of looks like. I'm enchanted, or I'm pleased to meet you, and you're talking about yourself. So because you're talking about yourself, males, if you're a male, you need to say encantado. Encantado, I'm enchanted, I'm not pleased. Or if you're a female, you should say encantada. That's the feminine form of this word, and you're saying I'm pleased. Encantada. So, mucho gusto, nice to meet you. Encantado, encantada, nice to meet you, or enchanted. Now, once somebody has said mucho gusto or encantado, so the one person has said nice to meet you, oftentimes we have a response for that as well. In English we say something like nice to meet you as well, the pleasure is mine. Same thing in Spanish. We can say literally, el gusto es mío, literally is the pleasure is mine. The pleasure is mine. El gusto es mío. El gusto es mío. Or we can say igualmente. Igualmente. And then we're saying equally, or I am equally pleased to meet you. That literally means equally. In English we might say likewise. Nice to meet you, likewise. Okay? Igualmente. Repite, igualmente. Okay, so we have different ways to say nice to meet you and different ways to say the pleasure is mine. Okay? Now, we also might want to ask then, where are you from? Now, this doesn't necessarily mean where are you living right now. This typically means, when we ask it, where are you from originally? And we use the verb ser, which means to be, and to be in certain situations, to be from a place, we use the verb ser. ¿De dónde eres? ¿De dónde eres? Where are you from? Literally, from where are you? This is the word that means where. Okay, from where are you? ¿De dónde eres? ¿De dónde es usted? So notice again, this is for the to form, and this is if we're being polite to that person or we don't know them. ¿De dónde es usted? Where are you from? Now notice usted, I wrote it out before, but it is just simply an abbreviation for that, usted, which means you in the polite form. ¿De dónde es usted? Where are you from? Okay, so both of these questions, where are you from? And then of course we change again, the verb is here and the verb is here. Excuse me, pardon. We change the verb that's in the question to the answer, of course, just like again we do in English. Where are you from? I am from. Same in Spanish. Yo, I am. Yo soy de Illinois. Yo soy de Illinois. Okay? Now, let's talk just a little bit about pronunciation, because pronunciation is important as we try to speak the language. Notice we have a lot of D's in this question. In Spanish, we talk about a D without a very hard D sound. So I actually want you to repeat after me and do this with me. Say the word in English, dad. Say it 3 times, and think about what your tongue is doing while you say the D's in dad. 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 And notice now your tongue is pushing up against the roof of your mouth to get that hard D sound. Dad. Now, in contrast, say the word father and think about what your tongue is doing on that TH of father. 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 And you'll notice your tongue is now pushing out toward your teeth and even a little bit in between your teeth to soften that sound up. So it's father. Well, in Spanish, when we say D's, we actually say them more like the TH of father than we do the D of dad. So it is de donde. Try to say it with a little softer D. De donde. ¿De dónde eres? ¿De dónde eres? Yo soy de, and we soften that as well. Yo soy de Illinois. Yo soy de los Estados Unidos, the United States. Tú eres. Now, we can also, because we're talking about this whole verb in chapter 1, we can also say that different people are from different places. And the book gives you some countries as well to start learning, like España, Spain. Tú eres de España. You are from Spain. Tú eres de España. Él, ella, or usted, he, she, or usted, you. Now notice all three of these, él, ella, and you, the polite form, not you, the familiar form, but you, the polite form, use the same form of the verb, es. So he is, or she is, or you are from Greenville. And someone from Costa Rica will say, ¿dónde? Where? Él, ella, usted, es de Greenville. Okay? And so the same thing on down. We can just say de and whatever the place. Nosotros somos. We are from los Estados Unidos. We are from the United States. Okay? So that's how we work with where are you from originally using the verb ser. Now, we also, in chapter 1, are dealing with a number of nouns. So we talk about books, notebooks, pencils, paper. All right? And the first thing about nouns we may need to make sure we understand in Spanish is that all nouns have gender. Not like in English. In English, this, for example, is scissors. And we don't care if scissors are masculine or feminine. It doesn't matter. They're scissors, right? But in Spanish, we do need to know if this is masculine or feminine. In Spanish, it is feminine. Las tijeras. And we just know that that's a feminine object. And we have to learn our nouns that way. We have to learn las with tijeras to know that it's feminine. This is a pen. And we have to know that a pen is masculine. El bolígrafo. So we learn it with the el in front of it. Or lapicero. El lapicero. And we learn that it's a masculine noun object. Or a feminine object. Okay? In English we don't care, but in Spanish we need to know. So, as we deal with those objects, we might ask questions like, how many are there? ¿Cuántos means how many? This is an interesting word in Spanish, I, and notice the H at the beginning of a word is not pronounced. No, we never say cuántos hey. No, no, no. ¿Cuántos hay? ¿Cuántos hay? Repite, hay. Okay? ¿Cuántos hay? Now, that word means both there is and there are. Okay? There is and there are. It works as both singular and plural. So when we ask the question, ¿Cuántos diccionarios hay? We're saying, how many dictionaries are there? And it can be a plural word. And when we answer them, we can use the same word. There are 31 diccionarios. 31 diccionarios. How many dictionaries are there? There are 31 dictionaries. But notice, because diccionarios is masculine and plural, our question word how many has to be masculine and plural as well. If we're asking about grabadoras, which is feminine and plural, our question word cuántas has to be feminine and plural as well. ¿Cuántas grabadoras hay? How many tape players are there? And we have to make sure that our question word cuántos agrees in gender, masculine or feminine, and in number, singular or plural, with the noun that is coming behind it. Okay, so that's asking how many of something, and we need to know that our nouns in Spanish have gender. They're either masculine or feminine, and they're either singular or plural. Okay? Okay, so now we're going to talk about showing possession in Spanish. Okay, posesivos. As you know, in English, we most often use an apostrophe S to show possession. It's Mark's book, it's Sylvia's car, etc. In Spanish, no. we cannot have an apostrophe S. It does not exist. So to show possession in Spanish, we have to say the book of Mark. Okay? So, instead of saying it's Mark's book, we have to say el libro de Marcos. El libro de Marcos. We cannot have the apostrophe S. So, here we say el libro es de Laura. The book is of Laura, or the book is from Laura. Okay? The book is of Laura, and that's how we have to show possession in Spanish. We cannot say Laura's libro. No, no. Okay? The book is Laura's. Es de nosotros. It is ours. Again, in English, we would do an apostrophe S. It is ours. In Spanish, es de nosotros. It is of us. Okay, so no apostrophe S. Now, when we ask about possession in Spanish, we have a situation here where we have the word quien, which is actually the word who, but because we put a de in front of it, we're really asking of whom is the book. Okay? Of whom is the book. Now in English, of course, we wouldn't ask it that way. Again, we would say, whose book is it? But in Spanish, of whom is the book. Alright? Now, one little note to understand, that because book is singular, and we're thinking that there would be just one owner here, de quien, whose book is it, and we think there's probably just one owner. If we think there's more than one owner, like they say there are 3 cars outside, we probably wouldn't say, whose car is that, thinking that the answer is only going to be one owner. We'd probably think there are going to be 3 different people who own those 3 cars. Unless, of course, you're outside of a multi-million-dollar home, and then you might think, whose cars are those? However, if we believe that there's going to be more than one owner, then, because quien is singular, and we think there's going to be more than one owner, we really need to change that question to de, and then we just change this to plural, quienes. De quienes, and then we also, because es is singular, have to change that verb to son, the plural. So we say de quienes son, and then of course that's singular as well. The plural would be los carros. So de quienes son los carros. So you see how we've changed everything except the de from singular to plural, because we think, because one, there's more than one object, more than one noun, and we think there's going to be more than one owner as an answer to that question. Okay, so that's how we show possession in Spanish without an apostrophe S. And finally, for lesson 1 in the book, Adelante Uno, we're going to talk briefly about the 2 different questions we have with time and telling time. We won't go into the whole description of how to tell time with 3:30, 3:30, 5:15, 5:15, because the book explains that well, and you have activities to practice in the online activities with your homework. But what I do want to distinguish here, to make sure you understand, is that we have 2 separate questions here. One, the question, ¿qué hora es? Really means just, what time is it? Hey, you got the time? What time is it? Oh, could you tell me what time it is? Oye, ¿qué hora es? Okay, what time is it? ¿Qué hora es? Repite, ¿qué hora es? ¿Qué hora es? And remember, no H sound when we have an H at the beginning of a word in Spanish. ¿Qué hora? Hora. ¿Qué hora es? So, and that question is simply, what time is it? And so if the time is, say, 3 o'clock, then we would answer this question with son las 3. It is 3 hours. Son las 3. It's 3 o'clock. Son las 3. And we're just telling what time it is right now. So, if we have the question, ¿qué hora es? You answer with either son las 3, or if the time happens to be anything having to do with just 1 o'clock, then we say es la una. Again, we're changing because 1 hour is singular, 2 to 12 hours is plural. So that's why we have to say es here, la una, and everything is singular having to do anything with 1 o'clock. All right? So that's answering the question, ¿qué hora es? Now, there is a separate question, however. ¿A qué hora? If we put a in front of it, now we're asking at what time. So instead of just having you ask, oh, hey, you got the time? What time is it? Now you're asking, at what time is the class? At what time is Spanish class? At what time is the game tonight? Etc. Now in English, we don't put that at in there. You would just simply say, what time's the game tonight? What time is Spanish class tomorrow? Etc. Okay, we don't put the at in front of it, but in Spanish we do. We need to put that a in front of que, because now we're saying at what time does something start, or at what time is something. Alright? And the answer is simply taking the a and putting it in as well. So instead of up here saying son las tres, we replace that son with an a. We don't need that verb es or son now. We simply say a las cuatro. So if the question is a qué hora, then we answer with a las cuatro, at 4 o'clock. Okay? So we've covered the main areas now, besides looking and studying at vocabulary. We've covered the main areas in chapter 1, capítulo 1. So having done homework assignments online, looking at this explanation, our time together, whether that be in our online Adobe Connect room or whether this is a face-to-face class, our time together then is intended to work strictly on practicing this out loud and getting some good practice with speaking the language.